The eyes of fear, once you put bigger locks on your door, buy guns, close yourself off. The eyes of love, instead see all of us as one. Here's what we can do to change the world right now to a better ride. Take all that money we spend on weapons and defense each year and instead spend it feeding, clothing, and educating the poor of the world, which it would many times over, not one human being excluded, and we can explore space together, both inner and outer, forever.
Don't worry. Don't worry. I'm not going to do what everyone thinks I'm going to do and flip out, man. No, sorry. That's the newest piece of music you're going to hear anywhere close to this stream, guys. So welcome to the show. As you know, I'm Grindhead Jim, your host, and I'm really stoked to have Chris on today. He's one of the folks that was earliest in accepting me in the community, much like Pete, which is kind of an interesting linkage for me because now they're part of the larger Chasing 80's Toys crew, which is just freaking amazing to me. And by the way, chat, we're getting the whole Dancing Godzilla. It's going to get reworked by Yoshi Vu, CGI artist. And I don't know if he needs motion capture done to make that happen or not. But thank you, Pete. Thank you so much for the super chat. Appreciate that. Thank you so much. But if we have to get motion capture for the new Dancing Godzilla, Pete is going to get in the suit. So that's already a one and done thing. I'm not even going to ask you, Pete. It's just a thing now. So if Yoshi needs that done, we're going to find a way to make that happen. So all of that said, Chris is a very multifaceted and very supportive individual. And his background in music is something I want to explore today. So we're also going to talk about not just him and his background, might get some Jim stories in there too, but we're going to talk about pop culture in general. But without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce to you Chris Miwa. Welcome to the stream, buddy.
Hello. Doing good.
Absolutely. And I just got confirmation from Pete says we are doing this. So very good. Very, very, very good. I'm very happy about that. So I know it's super late there, and I know my reputation in the community at large about running things too long. We're not going to let that happen. My man's got to get some sleep. So what I want to start with is, obviously you're a musician. You have been for a very long time. We were talking before the stream about how you're both a guitar player and a bass player, but you started on bass.
Yeah.
What led you to that? What drew you to bass? Most people that I talk to that are bass players usually started with that because they felt it was an easier gateway to guitar. Was that the same for you, or was it something different?
No, I think, I come from a musical family, a family with a musical background. My uncles, my dad, they were in music in the 60s and afterwards. And we grew up, me and my brother, with music. My brother was very musically from the start. I was into toys and later discovered that I like music too. So I've been in music now for, let's say, about a year or 15. So it's not, I don't know, it's that long. And I was thinking, well, what sort of instrument would be good. A guitar is awesome because I like the sound effects and the sound licks you can do with it, and I'm really a sound engineer in that way. But you got a 6-string guitar and a bass has 4 strings, so of course, obviously, in your mind you think, well, 4 strings, that should be a lot easier. Let's start with the bass. And honestly, if you really want to play bass guitar very good, it's not easy at all. It's not true. But man, what an adventure it was. So yeah, I started with the bass guitar in a band, and from there on, it was a roller coaster ride.
It always is, man. With music, I think that once the bug bites you, so to speak, it's kind of hard to turn your back on it. And I was very active in music for a very long time. Left the industry pretty abruptly 10 years ago, about 10 and a half years ago. But it's something that has always nagged at me that whole time I've been away. And I still look at things from a musician's perspective, whether I'm listening to music or watching a film and listening to the way the cues work out and things like that. Do you find that, being a musician changes your perspective on the things that you experience in life? Do you feel like there was like pre-musician Chris and post-musician Chris, or?
Yeah, that's a good one. Excellent question. And yes, I definitely think music changed me. It made me more open-minded because when you play music, you're playing the universal language of the universe. Everybody understands music. Music can be emotion. Music can be fun. Music can be sad. Music can be everything in between. And it's a way to communicate even. And it opened so many doors for me and showed me a whole different perspective. And my overall experience with musicians is that they're pretty open-minded people, very easy to go with, even though bands break up a lot. So it's not easy and sunshine all the way, and it's definitely an addiction. Why don't the Rolling Stones stop performing? Even now they lost another band member, they keep on doing it. Paul McCartney still performs on stage. Phil Collins is trying to do his final gig. Those guys, do they do it for the money? I don't think so. I think it's in the blood. It's an addict. They want the jazz. They're on the jazz. They want to feel that energy.
Right, because when you're on stage and you're playing live, because composing and recording music is its own high, for sure, because you get the creative juices flowing, and it's kind of like this. There's always this feeling in the studio that anything could happen, and wow, thanks, thank you, Jody. Appreciate that very, very much. Generous tip. I'm still not used to the thing calling it out, but it's better than the larger notification, which is great. Thank you so much. But there's this feeling that even with structured songs that you've got written and rehearsed and just really just hammered and hammered and hammered, when you go in the studio and then you hear them and you can put them under the microscope, you feel like, ooh, it's like editing a video or a film where like you can totally change the way the story goes. But then you take those same songs and you get on stage and you're playing them in that rehearsed manner, but after like maybe 10 gigs or 15 gigs, little things start creeping in that you never would have done in the studio. And I get a huge kick out of listening to like stuff we recorded on a CD in 2006 and then fast forwarding to like 2010 playing that same song. Sometimes it's faster, sometimes it's slower, sometimes there's a filler, there's a little like, bloop, or like a little vocal thing that is being done. Do you find that process to be natural? Because a lot of people say a film's never finished, but you have to release it at some point. I think music's the same thing, where you never really done messing with it. And I think that's the live part is what does that. Do you find that's part of the process or something else?
Definitely. You can rehearse in the repetition room for weeks and weeks to get the song right, but you're going to experience a total different level of playing the song when you're live. There's something you just can't rehearse for that moment when you're live, and things happen on the stage. And I think one of the most beautiful things that you can experience when you're live on the stage with your mates, with your band, is that something magic happens. You look at when you're playing bass guitar or you play drums, you look at your bass guitar player from the drums, and he looks back at you, and you time that rhythm perfectly with him. And you look at each other, and that there's some chemistry there, you know, and that the energy brews. You probably know what I feel for what I mean. It brews inside you from, hey, we got something going here. This is cool, you know, and boom, boom, and you go on. And also an experience is, and I don't know how that is for you, but when you go live, especially with your first gigs, you know, you're out of the rehearsal, the repetition rooms, and you got your first gig, and you're going to play live. Usually you play a lot faster, don't you?
Oh yeah. We had a huge reputation for that. Because the band I'm most known for, Cardiac Arrest here in the U.S., they had the drummer before them was a lot more thrash influence, like very like late 80s kind of a tucka thing. And I was hearing these riffs, and like on the demo, I kind of felt like, well, these riffs are really like blazing, really hard riffs, but the drummer's pulling them back. It's almost like a barrel tied to the car, just dragging it along. You can tell the car's trying to go faster and it just can't.
Yeah.
And I said, if you ever have a problem with that guy, get me in there, because I'm going to take these old school riffs and play them old school, but with a bit of a charge.
Yeah.
So the song would go from to
yeah.
Then you rehearse it for 6 months like that, go play a show, and then the adrenaline's up, and then it's come out.
Yes, that
and so
happens.
for like, yeah, so like for the first, probably for people that were familiar with the band up to that point, they're like, you know, their hair blew back and like, what is this? And then we were writing things with those capabilities, and people really started to latch onto it. So it's something where I think it's a cycle.
Yeah.
You rehearse something, and then you play it live, and then based upon the experience you have there and what you see the crowd reacting to, when you go back to write again, you have more of a more information about what is going to work, what's going to blow back your hair and theirs at the same time. And do you find that those live performances and that feedback, does that influence writing for you? Or are you one of those folks that are, no, I write for me and that's it, and then whatever happens? Like, because I think there's two schools there.
I'm not really sure where I am there. I think I don't write for me. Not that one. No.
Okay.
I think more option B.
Okay. So you tend to write what feels good. You're a feel-good guy.
Yeah, definitely feel. You got to feel what happens, you know, in your audience. If there's 400 people or just 40 or 10, you got to connect with that. You know, that's the most important thing. Of course, you're not playing in yourself or with your mates only. You're playing for them as well, and you have to connect with them. You know, you have to feel that vibe. But so yeah, totally.
So for those that may not be familiar, because I don't know if you've ever explicitly said this, what style of music is your favorite to play?
Ooh, that's a wide range. That's important because I played 60s music. I did. I'm also a singer, so I also did some crooning music, like Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, Bing Crosby, the good old days of Hollywood. That vibe, I really love that. I love 80s music. I did a lot of 80s cover work, but also some 90s stuff. You know, Nirvana, White Stripes. Everybody knows that song, Guns N' Roses. But also newer stuff. You know, we did songs from Beyonce, and we made our own twist on that. So I've been in loads of bands, all trying different things on stage, you know. And 80s is popping up as one of my favorite styles because of the nostalgia. It feels, you know, you grew up with that song. Music is like the soundtrack of your life. You remember when you grew up in the 80s and heard that song. When you hear that song nowadays, it can take you instantly back, and the audience that is listening has that same reaction. When you as a band play that song, they're like, oh man, yeah, I was in high school then, and then this and this happened, and oh my, or whatever memory is triggered. That's the beautiful thing about music. It's sort of magic, isn't it?
Really
Queen
is.
said it.
I mean,
Queen said it. It's a kind of magic.
Yeah, that's true. Easily, like basically, Queen is tied with Napalm Death as my favorite band of all time, and most people
Mm.
wouldn't know that. Because Queen, people were like, well, if you had to take one discography, like, well, take Queen because you've got every style of music
Mm.
practically represented there in their finest form. Like they did some of the first punk stuff before there was punk. They did
Yeah.
um, that kind of like if you listen to Ogre Battle on Queen 2, which is from like 74 or 5, I forget which, but it certainly predates Iron Maiden by several years.
Mm.
Ogre Battle is more Iron Maiden than frickin' Iron Maiden is. If you really like, doom, 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 doom. Like the whole gallop thing, I was like, you stole that from Queen, practically.
That happens a lot. That's
But they
stealing,
made it.
right?
Yeah, but it's uh, that's Iron Maiden's thing, and they do what they do, obviously. You know, I've done a lot of experimental stuff over the years, most of which never saw a wide release. I've also done jazz. I've done 80s pop stuff. I'll sit
Yeah.
in with cover bands and stuff like that. And it just so happened that I fell into the metal thing, so to speak. And
Mm.
anytime I get to kind of break out of that and play something else, I tend to have that much more fun. Basically, because I'm not having to focus all of my attention at going 120 miles an hour
Mm.
and hitting all these really intricate things and going all over the place. Also, then I can play a Doors song and just sit there and just think about my taxes.
Yeah.
You know, it's
Really?
and it's no big deal. You know,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
by comparison. But with the 80s stuff in particular, although there's certainly aspects of this in the 60s and 70s, but I think the 80s really took this into overdrive with synthesizers and sequencing, where the
Mm.
syncopation and things flowing in and out of each other and polyrhythms and all these things
Yeah.
really came to the forefront. So I think that 80s pop in particular is really difficult to play in a way that people wouldn't normally associate because it's so seductively simple to the ear.
Yeah.
But to get it to sound that way takes a lot. So it brings me a question from Jim Largo who asks, "Did we study music theory or pick stuff up along the way?" I'll let you answer that first.
I learned, I'm a self-taught musician, so I learned everything myself. I don't read the notes. I just know to read chords or bass steps or what will you. And I taught all that stuff to myself. It started with a bass guitar, and you learn what the strings are called, and you learn from, hey, this is an A, this is a B, this is an F, this is a G, this is a C, D. You learn where everything is. You learn your way around it. You start with simple songs, with just a few. Rock and roll is a good way to start out if you want to start musician, because most of the songs can be played basically with 3 chords, right?
Hmm.
So Johnny Be Good, it's like, or Roll Over Beethoven off, and you start with that. And when you're a bit more familiar and you feel more with more ready for it, you start doing other riffs and things and extra, things there. And yeah, it becomes so much more fun. You're a musician on a guitar, and you're putting extra layers in there, extra sound effects, and you can, there's so much diversity to a bass guitar itself, let alone the
Absolutely.
guitar. When I start playing guitar, and maybe that's fun to talk about a bit later. I really love the 80s synthesizers, like Jan Hammer, for instance, from the Miami Vice tune. So I practically turned my guitar into a synthesizer, and I was playing six
Hmm.
string with a with sounds coming out that took you right into the stratosphere. And people in the audience was like, "Damn, where's that sound coming from? There's no keyboard player. Who's doing that?" And then so that's cool.
Yeah, I before I answer the question, I want to just briefly interject. Like you said, we'll talk about this more because it's a great thing. I remember being in a band in Pittsburgh, and they were touted as like the black metal band of the area,
Mm.
but it's a bunch of like aging white dudes that have no direct, Viking or Scandinavian heritage, and they're just playing the Scandinavian style music. And I was just like,
Yeah.
this is a weird pairing. But this guy had the most overt guitar setup I've ever seen
Yeah.
before or since, and I've toured with some big bands. This guy had 3 full stacks,
Mm.
and each pair of speakers was for a different frequency range, and he had a full
Oh
stereo
yeah.
crossover.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So he had 2 18s for the low end, he had 4 12s for mids, and then 4 10s for his high, and he ran everything like that, and he had this big Korg board that had full synthesizer stuff in it, and he could like make things sound like symphonic strings and stuff. And this is all within the confines of like this really like kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And I was just like, you're really, you have too much at your disposal for the type of music that you're writing. And then 10, 15 years later, I find out he's playing out of just a Mesa half stack with just a couple of effects. He's like, yeah, it was too much. Like, I tried to tell you that in frickin' 1997. You wouldn't listen to me. But I think that effects can get away from things. So as far as music theory, I am self-taught as a drummer. I had a band director pull me aside, tried to teach me notation, but my brain doesn't work that way because, and you may understand this, Chris, but the audience may not.
Mm-hmm.
I see music as like pavement.
Yeah.
Where there's lots of imperfections, there's little nooks and crannies, and there's cracks in there. And I basically want to take what I'm doing and fill in everything and make it smooth.
Yeah.
So that everything just has this nice thick wall, and that everything kind of gels together in a way that it's just a smoother ride for everybody. And because I think in those, I think visually with music, like I can see it, man. It's not like that, but I will hear something and I'll go, okay, there's something needs to go here, something needs to go here, and I can't even look at the person playing it. I have to hear it and just kind of stare off into space and let the eyes go out of focus till I get to that place. And I find that people that are too focused on theory or the right way to do things are very limited.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes can become predictable. But if you learn the theory and then go beyond that, I think is where it kind of goes. But I find that most of the best musicians I've ever played with are self-taught that picked up theory by accident. Personally.
Yeah, good thing. Eddie Van Halen said it right. If it sounds good, it's good, and that's all I needed to learn.
Exactly. So when we're talking about the 80s stuff, one band that springs to mind is Tears for Fears, which were kind of like the sister band to Duran Duran, but a little bit darker, a little bit heavier.
Yeah. Definitely.
You have them up there? Yeah.
I got all their LPs up there, a ton of singles up there. That's part of my vinyl collection up there, and there's a lot down here as well, and there's CDs in the middle, and here's that Kenwood 80s amplifier with a Sony record player, so that I listen old school music.
I don't blame you one bit. I have often, so in metal circles, like when they find that I'm really into like synth pop and synthwave and stuff, it's like, what? Like I would be in the van or the bus, and I would be listening to like Vince DiCola synth stuff or Tears for Fears or Duran Duran, because when you're doing a certain kind of music for a living, the last thing you want to hear when you get off stage is that same stuff. You want to have a break. If you worked in a restaurant all day, you don't want to go out to dinner. You want to come home and have something different. So it's something interesting for me that I think a lot of people that play music have wider tastes in music just by virtue of needing an escape. So, but when we talk about that 80s pop stuff, almost all of the popular music sounded similar, but also at the same time very different. Whereas if you go to pop now, everything is just this auto-tuned just wall of nonsense that I can't discern, and I can't figure out if that's the industry trying to impart a certain style because they think it worked once. I don't know. What do you think made the 80s pop different, even though they were using a lot of the same tools? What do you think made that different?
Ooh, that's a good one, because a lot of new streamings were coming up. The synthesizer already existed in a simplified, well, nothing simplified, but in a different form in the 60s, of course. And that evolved and really took center, and the guitars were out at a certain point in the 80s, and synthesizer and stuff was hot all of a sudden. Then the guitars came back, of course, and I don't know, I think it was a lot of pioneering going on there, a lot of different styles, and the fashion came, and the video clip that did a big thing in the 80s, of course. Before the 80s there were no video clips, so I think that the TV, MTV, music TV, that did a lot. lot too for that, you know. So I think, yeah, I think that's it, you know, and maybe nice for the people in the chat. I don't know how this is going to sound across when we were talking about. This is a normal guitar, a 6-string Ibanez, and when I play a chord, it sounds clean like this. That's just a normal chord. And when me and Jim were talking about that magic, that, you know, fiddling, and this is an echo coming along, so it sounds now like this. You know, there's a real echo-y going on. And when I want to go synthesizer-y, I got another effect here. And now you can play a synthesizer on your guitar. So that's the fiddly stuff that I really enjoy. So that's, I'm back to a normal guitar again. But all that aside, yeah. Go ahead, mate.
Oh, so what I find interesting, though, and part of this is something that I have seen in recent years, the whole synthwave movement in particular has really come back in a big way. Bands like Gunship and others like that are coming in and doing things that sound like they're straight out of the 80s without being derivative.
Yeah.
And so they're not aping what came before, but they're still very evocative. Like they make you feel that same way those songs did. So I think that the innovation and willingness to experiment in those times certainly created a template, but also kind of left the book open with a lot of blank pages in the end. I think there's a lot more that could be said there. And I think that some of the best inspiration for those things came from things in film and are still, in some cases, in film. One of the earliest examples that I can think of in terms of a mainstream film really kind of taking advantage of that was the first Halloween film with John Carpenter playing piano on a synthesizer, not because he was like really into the synthesizer, but it was just a budget thing where this is, I have this, it works, let's do this. And you hear that same theme in the newer films where he also did the score there, but he's playing on either an actual piano or a much better sampled piano. And it's got this uncanny valley where it's not like, you're not quite sure like how you're supposed to feel because it doesn't sound the same, but yet it is the same. And but that little do 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 is such a big part of culture. You hear that, you instantly know what it's from, you know who it's associated with, and then you have all these thoughts of specific movies that came after it and everything. And I think that it makes it that much more of a visual medium sonically, as weird as that sounds, because as soon as you hear it, you see something in your head. And I think MTV did something similar. So it's interesting to me that the synth stuff really hit in film, whether we're talking about Halloween or Blade Runner or certainly Terminator, things like that. And then you have MTV with actual bands doing similar stuff in a larger scale, and they also have visuals that we will always associate. You don't really see that now because people sure they'll do like their visualizer videos or their lyric videos where the lyrics are like popping in your face and all this trash. And music videos are hollow these days. I have yet to see a music video since like maybe the mid 90s where it really went for something. They're just too literal. I don't know if that's just an inherently 80s thing or if people just didn't share the secrets. Or do you have any theories on that or anything that you think about when you look at the two together?
I think Michael Jackson with Thriller set the bar very high in the 80s. You know, the video clips were movies at themselves in their own rights, you know. And I don't know, you know the song from Kate Bush, Cloud Busting, with the actor, help me with his name, It's on the tip of my tongue.
Oh, my brain is saying Keanu Reeves, but I know it's not him.
No, it's an older actor, and he's also in the Eagle Has Landed, and I know him very well, but the name just gone blank. But it's with that cloud making machine. There's a whole story playing there, and you're sucked into the story, and you listen to the song. Or there were songs like with animation in the 80s, you know, like Paul McCartney with the Frog Song.
Mm-hmm. And Aha with
would Take On Me. That's a real good one. Yeah, there's so much happening there, and you don't see that nowadays. I don't know if I don't watch a lot of modern stuff. I'm more into the vintage music, like I'm into vintage toys, you know. But now when I see modern music, I don't really see that happening again. It's a flashing, hip-looking music clip with effects of words of things. What you just said, you know. But in the 80s, there were all movies in their own right. There was something happening there, or there was fun. Like, this is not a movie, but it's I don't know if you know the series from the 80s, The Young Ones, and they did a song with Cliff Richard, Living Doll. You know, that was so much was happening there, you know. And yeah, I think the 80s was something special, you know. And for everybody in the chat today here, and you and I'm so grateful I've been through that time and remembered it. You know, that I was part of that. That was something special. And of course, music was brilliant in the 60s and before, and there's so much great development in music in the 70s, but the 80s, that
there was something unique about it.
Yeah.
Whether it was simply the effects of post-Vietnam world getting into more technology with music, television coming into it so as something they were trying to, everyone, it seemed like they were trying to move on from the 60s and 70s culturally, especially in the Western world, in the States especially. And I don't know if that was the same in Europe, although I would suspect there was some of that bleed over. But it leads right into a question that Jim Largo asked. He says, question for you and Chris. 80s pop culture seems completely dependent on the music. Why do the 80s seem more tied to music than other eras? I think that's an excellent question. I would say that it kind of comes back to what we're talking about, where I think there's something in the visuals and the way that we were taking music in at the time. And also, if we were driving somewhere and my mother would be changing the radio station, every time you change the station, or if you even said on one station, it was like iconic song after iconic song after iconic song. You don't get that now. Even in stations playing good music, it's just like it's a weird mishmash of stuff. I don't know if it's a nostalgia thing or if it's something that's scientific with, like we said, the visuals or whatnot.
I think both. I think it's a bit of both. Of course, you're nostalgic about it, so you remember mostly all the good things, you know, with memories and yeah. And the other thing, you know, it's both. It's a bit of both. I'm sure of it. Yeah, there was so much happening by that. Johnny Sorensen, I'm Wired for Sound from Cliff Richard.
and a lot of love for the young ones there. And I absolutely loved that to death.
That's so great. You know, I don't know if you remember the first time when you saw a video clip like this with a song and the clip on TV with the young ones. I was like, that was great, you know.
That's one of those properties that in the States, anyway, we got it late. We got it about 2 years later than you did in the UK and Europe, and it's something where even though it was late getting to us, it was timely. It's a lot like what I have heard about American stuff getting over to UK and Europe, where it just fit. It just kind of worked. But I find that interesting, where there's so much time can pass, and yet it still is of its time. Something like that. And what a lot of people don't stop to think about, they think of it as this zany UK sitcom, but it's actually a variety show with a bunch of vignettes within the show if you pay attention. And even the musical guests are kind of interwoven into the story.
Definitely.
And they had such a wide range. of guessing that they had like Motorhead and what's the name of the one? It's the song about the house. Crap, I don't remember. In the middle of the street, our house. They were on there, and
Madness. No, no,
Madness.
no.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, Madness.
It was Madness. Yeah,
Yeah,
and and then they're at the club later, and Madness
yeah.
is there, and he's talking about, if anything by Cliff Richard, you own it, I'll smash your face in. It's because they're always dogging on Cliff Richard.
Yeah,
So I
that's
always
so
thought it was
great.
cool that they did that callback and then did a song with him and stuff. And
Yeah, definitely. The
but
80s, yeah, it was such a great thing for series, for movies.
mhm.
You had the movies with the big scores. You had TV series in the 80s. Elf got his own song, "Stuck on Earth."
Sure did.
Look it up on YouTube. This is fun. Mr. T of the A-Team had a song. David Hasselhoff on Knight Rider. He sung this on the Berlin in Berlin on the wall. With his jacket with all the lights. I don't know if you remember that one.
Mhm.
That was on TV.
Yes.
So he had a musical career. We talked about Miami Vice earlier, to bring up a good series, and I think this was one of the strongest series coming out of the US that we got to see in the Netherlands, because every episode there were Glenn Frey, Phil Collins, all these great artists that wanted to be on the show at a certain time, because it was good for their career, and it was great. So this is definitely a series that music is one of the strong points from the series, next to the fashion, the cool cars, of course. And
with Miami Vice, it was something where the TV series had the look and the feel of the 80s, and these
yeah,
pop icons were like, that's a good vehicle to, no pun intended, it's a good vehicle to push what we're doing, and it was just slotted right in. And I can't think of another time period in history where you had that kind of direct integration of
yeah,
the pulse of music and what was really hot on TV. Not quite in that way. There's certainly, I mean, name any popular show from America and arguably UK and Europe at the time, and there's a song in some way that you will always associate with that show, whether it's the theme or
yeah,
something else.
yeah.
Like that, I remember when I was a kid, we had a Kmart in the States, which is kind of the precursor to a Walmart,
Mhm.
and they would have all of these tapes, just cheapo, just generic looking things.
Mhm.
I remember getting this TV hits, but for whatever reason, they didn't have the rights to just give you the original version. It was someone's cover
Oh yeah,
of
yeah, yeah. Okay.
and it was like, and they pumped the synthesizers way up, so it was like almost like a synthwave TV themed crossover. It was the
Yeah.
weirdest thing, like hearing the A-Team theme on a really cheap keyboard, like
Yeah, 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 yeah.
it was surreal. Well, they don't do that now. Like, there's no TV shows like, okay, I have to have the Law and Order theme on a cassette tape right now. Like, even though that's a pretty good theme song, but
Definitely.
there was you could get 45s of like the Greatest American Hero, which I still own, the 45 with Greatest American Hero on one side, and the other
Yeah.
side had Hill Street Blues on it. I love those themes.
Yeah.
It's crazy. It's crazy. And Scott Hughes is like, oh, I have those TV themes cover discs. That's awesome. I didn't even know they were still in print, man. That's
Yeah, yeah,
awesome. That's
yeah,
really cool to
yeah.
hear.
I think I have a few on LP even. These huge compilations of Star Wars is on there. A lot of sci-fi songs, but then played by others, so you don't get the original. And that's real fun. But the 80s, there were such great names in the 80s as well. One of
Yes.
the biggest musicians ever. Elvis is great, the Beatles is great, Chuck Berry is great, Bob Marley. There's been heroes, before Jimi Hendrix, but the 80s, we got George Michael, one of the best voices ever. Stevie Wonder was already there in the 70s, but also in the 80s. one of the unique voices. Sting from the Police started in late 70s, also there in the 80s. Success, we had Madonna, we had Michael Jackson, we had MC Hammer. That's late 80s, I believe.
He started in 88, and then of course you had like Will Smith when he was going by the Fresh Prince, started in like 86,
definitely,
which I'm a huge fan. I have a
yeah.
T-shirt of that of him with the whole like he's like
that's
the
great.
whole thing.
And again, hip hop, another stream that really took off in the 80s, and that's what Run DMC, LL Cool J, I Need Love. A very young LL Cool J, and now when you see him in NCIS, what's that called? NCIS L? No, that's not LA, or is it LA? Anyway, it's fun to see a very young Scuba Pete, LL Cool J rapping. When I'm alone in my head, I'm staring at the room, and then in the back of my mind, I hear my conscience telling me I need a girl who is sweet at the door. For the first time in my life, I feel I need love, Why do I still remember that song? I've heard it in the 80s. I haven't sung this for, and it's still there,
But it's right. It just digs in, and because a good MC could spin a story in an entertaining and musical way that we'd never heard before. And it was something that was totally foreign because it had elements of funk. And certainly it brought a lot of the street vibe to it because this is how people entertain themselves for a long time, just on the street corners there and doing freestyle before they even called it freestyle. And then suddenly they started making records, or as Ice-T would say, records. And things just sort of kind of spiraling along. And also like the hard rock and heavy metal stuff really came into its own in the
definitely.
80s. It had its precursors with the early Van Halen stuff. Certainly Queen was a huge influence on it. Kiss, can't not mention Kiss. I'm not a fan, but I respect them. Just like with the Beatles, I'm not a fan, but I respect what they did. I'm more of a Doors guy. That's kind of more where I go from that time period and so forth. And I mean, even as a metal guy, people are like, "Well, do you like Black Sabbath?" I'm like, "Yeah, I like the Dio stuff." And they're like, "Huh? What?" I'm like, "The Dio stuff's better. Fight me." But there was so much variety too. But not just the variety, because you have that now, but there's also at that time everything was big. Whatever taste you had, there was an arena somewhere with a show of that stuff. It's crazy.
The power concerts. That's also the arenas full of those big, huge concerts. That was typically something from the 80s. Now that you say arenas, just popped in my mind from, we didn't see that before. You had Woodstock and big festivals, but the football stadiums with Queen performing there, or Genesis in Wembley Stadium, that was something we never seen before, I believe. And that's still
85, I want to say, was the Live Aid thing where
Live
you had
Aid.
Wembley.
We had USA for Africa, We Are the World. You had Band Aid, Do They Know It's Christmas Time at All? And those were also things typically of the 80s, all these musicians coming together in America and did the song USA for Africa. And the Brits with Bob Geldof, they did, Do They Know It's Christmas Time at All, with all the best that the British, music had to offer at that time. And I think that's also something very typical of that time, don't you think?
Yeah, and like the last instance of that you saw even close to that was the Concert for Life in '92, which was commemorating the death of Freddie Mercury, and it was a big AIDS awareness thing. It was very similar. It was like a telethon kind of situation, trying to raise that awareness at a time when that was like the hush hush thing. You didn't want to talk about it, and they were like, "Well, now we have to," kind of thing. And it was something where, to my recollection, that's the last time that really occurred.
Yeah, definitely.
And I would argue that, it was something that could only be born. It was like the perfect, ending to the 80s, if you will. It's like, it was almost like when Freddie died, the 80s died with him, kind of a thing, at least musically.
A lot happened. Yeah,
because by that time, Nirvana was coming up, and Soundgarden, and all the grunge stuff, which one could argue that there was an industry push from it because they saw that one was selling, so they pushed everything. It's the same thing with like hip hop and metal before it, where they saw one thing doing well, they tried to push anything out that they could, and there was a lot of junk that came out, just like in the 80s too. There's certainly some trash stuff that came out, but we don't remember it because there was so much good stuff.
Yeah, definitely.
In the 80s.
Definitely,
there was a comment. I gotta find it. It jumped on me, but it was talking about the fact that even some celebrities got in on the music thing, even though they have no business singing.
Kojak, for instance,
Yeah.
But he had a beautiful voice, I think.
Yeah, but it was something where you would not, you wouldn't have ever thought that. But then you have like William Shatner doing his whole thing, which
yeah, or Leonard Nimoy and the Hobbit, the Hobbit song. Do I dare bring it up?
Bilbo Baggins, only 3 feet tall. The whole thing.
Yeah.
Richard Harris, yeah, that's a good one.
Telly Savalas, yeah, Kojak, yeah, definitely. I don't know if did Columbo, Peter, the guy who played Peter Columbo, Falk? Peter Falk, did he ever did a music thing?
I don't think so.
No, he did a lot of movies, but yeah, I'm not sure there.
Really I would have loved to have heard him do a song called "Just One More Thing." Just something's bothering me. Perfect. Like I would love to hear a song like that. It would be amazing.
I don't. Yeah, yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
Tim Curry had a reggae album. I did not know that.
That's new to me too, sir. I did not know that. Yeah, a lot of
something
those.
Else I didn't know.
Let me see. What has Cody got there? There was
a record in the 80s called Doctor in Distress, where UK celebrities and musicians got together to stop the cancellation of Doctor Who.
Oh, yeah, that rings a bell. That rings a bell somewhere for me because, we were close in the Netherlands. You touched on it before, the influence for us in the Netherlands were a lot coming from the UK and America. Those were the two big ones that, and we had a bit from you got Nina, of course, from Germany. Kraftwerk before that from Germany, but there was a lot coming from the US and the UK, and of course Australia. They got some really great bands. With my favorite band from Australia, two bands, Ice House and In Excess.
That's a pretty good pairing.
That's
and just since we're on the subject, this shirt I'm wearing right here, Bestial Warlust, from Australia. So
that's so we even played a few In Excess numbers, I believe we did. Do you recognize that?
I think I do. I'm not as familiar with the In Excess stuff today as I once was. I'm getting old, Chris.
We're all getting old.
Yeah. It's a fact.
We're both growing beards now,
Well, mine needs to get trimmed in a big bad way. I got to get trimmed this week because I have the convention, and if I show up looking like a homeless person, I'm going to get like pennies at my booth. It's going to be like, oh, this poor guy, he's just got a bunch of stickers. Just give him some pennies for his trouble. But Kieran Ball with Delivering the Goods. It says Peter Falk did sing in the musical Robin and the Sun.
Yeah, he was in there with Sinatra and Bing Crosby, and I thought I saw him perform somewhere, and it was in this music. Yeah, and that's a great film too. Those big stars of the time, and he's this mafia kind of guy. He has a great role in that. I'm gonna watch that movie again soon. If anybody in the chat recognized the small bit I just played. Somebody recognize that? Put it in the chat,
Let us know.
Little bit of gaming.
Says, yes. Does anyone remember Don Johnson's musical career? I don't think Don Johnson remembers his musical career. It lasted like 8 seconds.
He doesn't remember it, but I got a few of his singles up there. Heartbeat being, I think, the most familiar song he did. And Nothing But a Heartache Away. He did that after that. But Heartbeat was, I think that was his biggest hit. Yeah.
If you can call it that,
Yeah, for his, that was the biggest thing he's done, great. And some little fact for you who don't know, one of the greatest rock bands from the 80s for me came from the Netherlands, at least two of them. Eddie and his brother Van Halen, they came from, I believe they lived in Den Haag in the Netherlands, and then they moved over to the US, you know. But in the Netherlands, Eddie and his brother, they played on the piano, Yo and his brother played the drums, and that's where the bass, I think, formed for that band that we all love.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
Eddie Van Halen, he's Dutch. Was Dutch.
Yeah, I would argue that when you get into music at such a young age, your environment influences everything. So I did know that. If anyone checked didn't know that, that's really good stuff. Because I do think that there's a certain otherworldliness about Van Halen stuff, because it does come from a place that for Americans is foreign in terms of, like, because I know that education in Europe and particularly the Netherlands is very different than it is here in the States. And I think that because it's a more open environment, things are encouraged a bit differently. And because he certainly has that parentage and everything, that influences everything. One could make the same argument for Lars Ulrich being Danish, coming over to the States and having his thumb on the pulse of the European stuff before anyone else did, because word did not travel as fast. And that's kind of how Metallica came to be. So there's an undeniable European influence on the sound of the 80s, even though it's not overt. You know, a lot of Americans are like, oh, he's full of blah, blah, blah," like, and it's totally in there. Americans like to think that we're the center of the world, and we invariably are not. We just speak the loudest.
And we got an answer in the chat. I see at least Keith Knight, Never Tear Us Apart by In Excess. So that's right.
Aha.
And above that, we have a question from Newcastle. Didn't Tubbs make a record too? Yes, he did, sir.
That's a bit of trivia for you. Sure.
He did, yes.
Of all the, so let's bring this around, because we didn't put any rules that we weren't going to talk about toys at all. But so I'm going to kind of bleed this one in just so that people know that I'm not a complete dictator about this stuff.
Go ahead.
But in your opinion, of all of the television shows that had any toys attached to them, which was the best theme song and why?
Jason and Wild Warriors and Mask. Those brilliant, both by the same composers from Israel, Shuki Levy and Haim Saban. They did so many cool scores in that era. But those, as a kid, and that intro started, and then that's brilliant, you know. And the G.I. Joe song was pretty cool too, you know. That I don't know if I can play it. Yeah, something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, you only bummed one note and you found it. So it was
He-Man is. Something like that. Yeah, that's. I don't know how to play the World Warriors song because that takes a bit more searching. But that's a great tune, you know.
It really is.
And good buddy in the chat, Gen X Toys Geek Jody and I are gonna do a crazy Dutchy live stream about World Warriors later in November. So heads up for that one.
That's one of those toy lines that I was really engrossed in as a kid, but we didn't get the TV show where I live because syndication being what it was. I didn't get to see that show until years later. So I didn't have that association. But I got, because of that, I got to make my own mythology with the toys and had a lot more fun with it.
Cool.
But those toys were just, they were limited in what they could do.
Yeah.
But I think with Wheeled Warriors, and I don't want to go too deep into the weeds on the toy thing, but I'm going to put this out there now and maybe plant a seed for later. But I think every kid that had a bunch of Wheeled Warriors had specific configurations that they liked for each vehicle and stuck with those. And other kids would be like really stuck on the stock parts. They like, it has to be this way. I always liked the main toy with the crane with the clamp, the hero one. I always took the chassis, the axles, and flipped them underneath so it was a lowrider. And I put the gold wheels on it and would just It would just be a low
A tech
riding.
track, yeah, awesome. That's a tech track.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you got all these parts with those toys, and
Mhm.
I start fiddling straight away, making my own creation. But that's the same Lego. You get Lego, you got the
Mhm.
instruction. You can go with the instruction, but I did that once, maybe 2 times, but took it all apart and start creating my own things. You know, Same with music.
Yeah.
You got a song here. Okay, this is how it sounds. This is how it plays. You start playing, but you start fiddling, putting your own stamp on it, and that's what we did with toys too. At least you had some that did, and you had some that stuck to the instructions. Or I did a video in my early YouTube toy channel. I wouldn't even call it a career, what I'm doing, about Manosaur, that combiner. One of my favorite combiners from the Transformers is Manosaur. And I got one of the legs the other way down, around, or the arms the other way than that it should be, according to what's on the box and the instructions and how it's on TV. But I was like, that's how I did it as a kid. So I automatically did that for my video. And I immediately got a comment from, not saying, hey, good video, whatever. No, from that's supposed to be on the other side. Stop. No, but that says again, that's the kind of person I was. That's how I transformed him in the 80s. I got my own privilege from, hey, no, breakdown should be on that side, on that end, and what have you, Wild Rider should be on that end, and that's how I transformed it. I put my own stamp on everything, and if it's right for you, it's right. There we go again, Eddie from Halen. If it sounds right, it's right. If it's right for you, that way you want to collect, who
Play
can
how
say
you
something
play.
about it?
Play how you
Yeah,
play.
play
Yeah,
how you play
absolutely.
perfectly. Yeah.
And I didn't want to get too far away from this. I think it's a great question. Jody asks, "What was your mythology for the dull orange you just named the vehicles, Jim?" Great question, actually. Even
Yeah.
though you're being a bit cheeky, I love you to death. Honestly, I went with the idea that the vehicles were all sentient, but they needed a human driver. So they kind of conscripted them and said, we need you to come with us to do this." And they're like, hey man, I'm just a pizza delivery guy. I don't get in a car, kind of a thing. So I didn't really have personalities so much for those figures, as much as they were necessary evils for them
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
be able to function properly. That's what I did. Um, Apparently, Alyssa Milano had an album in the 80s. I did not realize
Ooh.
that.
Yeah, I did not. Well, who knows? Maybe Tony Danza did too. I think a lot of people did that we don't even know about, forgot about, or there was so much going on out there. There even was a lot of crap in the 80s, believe it or not. But we, like you said, we like to remember the good stuff when we're talking about our nostalgia, right?
Right.
So
And
that's
Run With Us was an animal cartoon show that Johnny Sorensen is talking about. Um, for those of you that were there for Iconicon, or you weren't, you should go back and watch the cosplay stream, which featured RC from Cybertronic Spree, who did an amazing cover of Run With Us. And it's on their YouTube channel. It's amazing stuff. And they're very much flying the flag of a lot of great songs. And they have their own original music, which is amazing.
yeah.
They did some good stuff.
I'm gonna try. I got a band meet this weekend, next weekend, or coming weekend.
Mhm.
Is it Monday today? Sometimes I forget what day of the week it is. It's Monday today. Yeah, this weekend I got a band meet with some friends of mine, and one of the songs I'm rehearsing and gonna try to sing, I don't know if I can make it with my voice, is "You Got the Touch." I saw somebody in the chat
Yeah.
put that Transformer movie soundtrack up there. So yeah, I'm gonna definitely see if I can make that, and how we're gonna perform that.
Yeah, that is, for me, at least as a kid, and certainly now, my favorite soundtrack to any film in terms of an album. We went to see, Jill, aka Susan, and I went to see Transformers the movie in the theater a couple weeks ago,
Yeah.
and they didn't have a really good sound mix going, so it was a little bit underwhelming. But every time I hear those songs, I just get transported back, and I have that soundtrack on cassette, CD, 25th anniversary CD. I have a promo pressing of vinyl from the original. So it's
Yeah.
even rarer because it's promo press. Then I have
Yeah.
the re-release on vinyl and a couple other things, because I'm nuts. I'm gaga for that
Yeah, that's great.
soundtrack, man.
That is great. Great. Definitely.
It's absolutely crazy.
Yeah.
But it's something where there was a really diverse group of musicians on that. Like, I remember we were there, we're watching the film, and I'm used to watching it by myself with headphones or on like a big surround system or whatever. I'm not used to other people being around. I saw it in the theater when I was a kid, but I hadn't seen it with other people in 20, 30 years or something like that,
Yeah.
aside from like in my own house. And they get to the planet of junk, and then Weird Al comes on with Dare to Be Stupid, and I hear this guy at the end of the row go, "Pah! Weird Al Yankovic, I forgot he was in this film." And I'm like, "Oh, you haven't seen this in a while, huh?"
Yeah.
It was surreal to me. I guess I'm like the only person that has that movie memorized back to front and front to back.
Yeah.
It's
That's
kind
great.
of crazy.
Eric Idle in there.
Yeah.
We've got
for you.
That's
Oh, we've
great.
drawn a weep diddy bong. Yeah, it's a
almost
whole thing.
it's almost Monty Python in the yeah. He brings a bit of Monty Python to Transformers. Think about it,
Yeah.
which is another great franchise and with songs and stuff like. But that's not the 80s, right? We're back to the 70s there. Life of Brian,
Yeah,
was
but
that
pop culture.
was that 70s?
Yeah, like Brian was 70s,
Yeah.
late 70s. Meaning of Life was 80s. It was 83.
Yeah.
But he wrote
Holy
a lot of
Grail
music for
was in
Holy Grail
between
was
there.
75, I want to
Yeah.
say.
Great movies, great. If you love that, that stuff.
And all
That's
of them
great.
had songs, and Eric Idle, by and large, wrote most of them.
Yeah.
Who has gone on to a pretty successful career in Germany, as I understand it.
Oh, okay. I don't know that. I don't know. I didn't know that.
But it's something where, so much of it, is crossed over, whether we're talking about the toys or the TV shows and the movies, actors doing music, musicians doing acting. It all kind of came together in this weird mixing pot, if you will, in a way that I don't think we'll see the likes of ever again.
That's a good one. That's a good one. I want to bring up a music stream and like to hear your thoughts on it too. You know what you think of it. In the 70s, we had the glam rock, of course, and the disco. The 80s brought us something that only the 80s could bring, and that's the power ballad.
Yes.
And the rock ballads. And the rock ballads.
Yes.
A Foreigner, Mr. Cutting Crew. What is your take on that kind of music? I love it for myself, but what?
I definitely enjoy it. Although it was something that at the time, and especially as I got into the heavier and heavier stuff, it was something that was it was a big no-no. Death metal guy, you're not supposed to like that stuff. But I remember, I'll never forget this. We did a tour with a band from Los Angeles called Gravehill. Very primitive, old school death metal stuff, and we went all over the Midwest. And when we finished, we ended up. They were insistent on having White Castle. So we stopped at a White Castle, which is like these steamed burgers. They're gross. But they insisted on having these things. We came home, had all these burgers, drank all the beer in the house. And at like 7 a.m, it's just me and Bobby, the guitar player. We're the last guy standing. And we've been smoking all night, and we've been eating all night and drinking beer. And we're just loopy as hell. And we're singing like Skid Row at the top of our lungs and Foreigner and all these different things, Quiet Riot, like all the big hitters, about Journey. Like we sang a lot of Journey.
Journey,
to the
oh
point
my
where we
God,
lost our
beautiful.
voices.
Yeah.
Someday love will find you. It was like so pretty, but so aggressive at the same time.
Yeah.
It's like punching the TV screen, saying like someday, and you're like, "Ow, man, geez, okay, I get it. Level find me. You don't have to hit me." But I think overall, like, it's a very, very, very valid form of music, and unfairly maligned, I think. Very, very powerful. It was a good way to get on the radio because you could play it alongside other stuff. And for the heavier bands, like Journey was a much heavier band than most people give them credit for.
Oh, definitely.
But they're really known for those ballads. I think a lot of bands kind of crossed over into there. To get just to get their hooks into the zeitgeist.
Yeah.
And I always found that interesting that that was something where it was almost like a template, if you will. If you're having a hard time breaking in the U.S., do a ballad, and many bands fought against that for years,
Yeah.
famously and publicly. But Journey
Don't
really,
stop believing. Beautiful song.
yep,
Yeah.
absolutely. And now we got folks that are talking about their favorite ballads here, like Keith Knight here.
Yeah.
Rock ballad often gets slagged off by rock bands. It's Winds of
Oh,
Change by the
Scorpions.
Scorpions.
I
Yeah.
which Scorpion song did we did? I think it's even on YouTube. Somebody filmed that. Not Winds of Change. Is that the other one? Oh, Still Loving You.
Okay.
I'm
Yeah.
still loving you. Yeah, that's the one we did. Oh, that's a long time ago. I wouldn't even know how to play it anymore. I did the bass there, but yeah, the great band too.
Absolutely. And I think one that not as many people talk about now
Yeah.
as we did then. Scorpions in the heavier circles were always kind of like the joke, but we were only, it's like anything else. If you joke about it, if someone makes a joke about you, you're doing something right,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
that means, you know,
Happy
and
metal.
Scorpions were there.
Didn't they call that as a joke in the time from, hey, you're doing happy metal? Those bands like
Yeah.
Europe, for instance, the Final Countdown, or that
Sure.
was considered happy metal, you know, and they went power
Bon
ballad too
Jovi,
with
like Bon
yeah.
Jovi
Oh,
would do a lot of
definitely
stuff like that. Yeah. I mean, of course, you get into like the hair stuff, but also had amazing ballads
the
like
hair
Poison,
stuff.
like
Which one?
Poison, Motley Crue, Poison.
Oh, Poison.
Um,
Is that? Yeah, that's
mhm,
that song, right?
mhm,
Yeah.
mhm, I think
That was
so.
a long time ago. Yeah, oh, great song. I'm
Yeah.
just gonna grab, for the people who don't know what we're talking about, the cover from one of the Europe albums to see the beautiful
Okay.
hairstyles we're just talking about. Let's
Amazing
see.
stuff.
Yeah, definitely. Let's see if I can reach it. Europe should be right. All right. Rock the Night. That's ELO. Yeah, this is all right. Next to ELO is also a great band. I don't know. Better take the cover away so it shines a bit less. The hairstyles,
Nice.
they were like,
Hmm.
yeah, like that. And I
And you
think
had like,
the longest mullets or longest hairstyle, I think Ice House is probably the winner there. The singer from Ice House really had this hairstyle covered. And yeah, that's also a thing of the 80s, you know, the fashions that I love it. I love it.
it's so over the top. And for those of you that either weren't alive at the time or weren't paying attention to it, I recommend the documentary Decline of Western Civilization Part 2, which really gives you some of the best insight into what the glam scene in LA was really like.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And they interview some of the bands we're talking about to great effect. And it's tragically hilarious, is how I would describe that documentary. And it's really good. And it's also available on Blu-ray for the first time. That came out last year, and the
There you
transfer is
go.
beautiful, beautiful.
Yeah, definitely.
There's
Aha, we were talking about them a bit earlier.
nice,
That
nice.
the album covers were great, you know, and there's something special about having an LP, you know. After that came the CD, you have a smaller box, and now it's nothing, it's all digitalized, you know, it's on iTunes or whatever it's called. And you know, I like to have this, you know, this in my hand. This is
Mhm.
something beautiful to behold.
Like,
And
I enjoy using the technology to
Mhm.
listen to stuff right away.
Oh yeah, yeah,
But just like with the radio, if I hear something that I like, I immediately will buy the CD and put it on the shelf.
yeah.
Um, because I enjoy the convenience. I enjoy having things at my fingertips, but you still need to support those things. So, for example,
Mm,
last year when COVID hit, a lot of bands, like their entire income is
yeah,
selling merchandise, really. So I went on a spree. Like I was essentially collecting t-shirts and hats the way that I collect toys now.
yeah.
Like I have more shirts and hats than I know what to do with. Like it's insane. But I don't mind because I wear t-shirts and hats all the time. So it works out.
Yeah,
It's okay. You know, when I finally get around to doing laundry, I have shirts that I can wear. I can wear a different shirt every single day for like 3 months, and I wish I was joking. It's pretty nuts. But Wolfie brings up a good point here. Wolfie762 says, having the physical album was a great experience. I would come home with something new, and I would plug in my headphones, and I would sit, and I would listen to the music, and I would just go through the liner notes the whole time, listen to the entire record, and then listen to it again. I think that was, instead of taking formal music theory classes, I think really diving into music, that was my way of learning in many, many ways, I think. Were you like that, where you had to listen to the whole record? Or would you skip to like the song you knew? What was that experience like for you when you brought
No,
a
the
record home?
whole record, you know. I was very young in the 80s. I'm born in 79, so I was more into toys. But I remember the first record, I think I got that from my parents, and it's up there. I can get it even. Okay. This was the first record that started my collection. This is this single, Elton John with Nikita, you know. But when we're talking about an LP, Huey Lewis with 4, which is a great album, great band, you know.
It is.
The Power of Love, Back to the Future. It's on here, you know, Stuck With You. Great stuff, Hip to Be Square. You listen also to the songs you don't know. A very good example of that is, where do I have him? Where's Uncle Phil gone? Oh, here he is. This is a great, if you want to start collecting vinyls, 2 albums that are must-haves from the 80s. That's this band, Dire Straits, Brother in Arms, and Face Value from Phil Collins, which has In the Air Tonight on it. But the other songs on here, I didn't know them. And I started to listen to that, and there were some real jewels among the songs that I didn't know. And at a certain point, I listened a lot more to the songs that weren't the hit, that weren't in the charts, but had beautiful melody lines, you know, in them. So, yeah, definitely.
Queen is like that too.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of people with any of the bands we're talking about, and Queen being, I think, one of the best examples, there's maybe 24 songs by Queen that almost everybody knows, but there's like hundreds, it feels like, of songs that no one ever talks about, and even on some of their most popular records, things that just people just don't, because they didn't buy the album, they bought the singles, and they remember that, or from the radio or whatever. And I think with all of these examples, whether it's Tears for Fears or Duran Duran or Phil Collins or any of these, like, there's tons of great music. Like Billy Joel, some of his best stuff are the things you don't hear on the radio. And it's insane to think about how much music really kind of permeated in a way that, you know, it got into the consciousness, but there's so much more that if people would just look under the surface there.
Yeah, definitely.
Toys Geek. Jody, thanks for being here as long as you were. Totally understand. It was a treat that you were here. Get some rest, brother. I'm going to be wrapping up around the 1.5-hour mark anyway, for the same reason, because Chris needs to sleep like anyone else.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's late in the Netherlands, but have a good night, Jody. We chat soon, brother. So yeah, Scott. Brothers in Arms. Yeah.
I actually skipped. CD. I was going for this. Yep. Scuba Pete says it was great to have records, tapes, and excellent to flip on MTV and watch the videos. And that was something that we just don't have anymore.
We had to Walkman in the Scuba said tapes. Yeah, that's another thing from the 80s. For the first time, we could take our favorite soundtracks outside on the schoolyard, on the street, when you were walking the dog, jogging, or whatever you're doing. You were walking there in the real world, listening to your favorite soundtrack, or, you know, bands or what have you. Also something great from the 80s. Yeah, I got a few singles I lined up here, which is nice to go for. There are not that many, but this is some I have in my collection from great movies, great soundtracks. Ray Parker Jr., the Ghostbusters song.
Oh, yeah, that's unadulterated classic right there.
this has a story to it. You know, do you know what Huey Louie and the News and Ray Parker Jr. with the Ghostbusters song have in common?
Wasn't Huey Lewis tapped first and then they bowed out because they couldn't deliver on time or something like that?
No. They came up with the song Ray Parker Jr. Ghostbusters, but there's a song that was out earlier from Huey Louie and the News called I Want a New Drug. And if you listen to them, we got copyrights here on the live stream, obviously, so we can't play it for you right now, but it's stolen from Huey Louie and the News. So they sued the company, Columbia Pictures, or Sony, or I don't know who was after that. And yeah, they got a big amount of money for it, and then Ray Parker Jr. was allowed to use it, and the song came out anyway. And Huey Lewis, the News got a big sum of money for that, but it's stolen. The song is stolen from. So that's Ghostbusters. But yeah, speaking about Huey Lewis, Power of Love, Back to the Future, great song. We mentioned Michael Jackson before. You know, Smooth Criminal, Thriller. Those are two things that turn into a movie. Yeah, you had the movie Moonwalker, you know, with Michael Jackson. Who didn't see that? We had the James Bond songs of the 80s, and this is one of Michael Francis' favorite, I believe. The one with Duran Duran, View to a Kill, Aha, The Living Daylights.
Yep.
Great songs.
Classic songs. Classic.
Yeah.
Love them.
We had XLF, Beverly Hills Cop, you know, that's... and
how did we get this far in the stream and we didn't mention Howard Faltermeyer and Top Gun? Oh, my goodness.
That's definitely Billy Ocean, When the Going Gets Tough, from Jewel on the Nile. The song where we have Danny DeVito. I don't think if you can see the picture here. Danny DeVito, Michael Douglas, and, you know, with the three of them, they were in that clip. And, of course, who doesn't remember Berlin, Take My Breath Away? The movie, I've never seen the movie till now, but I know the song, and the song is, there's something about that, you know. Just to call a few, I picked from my cupboard before we went live, and there's so many more.
And with Top Gun, like the soundtrack was really perfect for what it was, but I don't think that we can mention that without talking about the fact that Top Gun got an Oscar for sound design and sound mix. And I think that the music certainly is a part of that, because even when music comes in, there was other things that were very prevalent, and it was just a masterfully edited and woven together soundscape. Where I don't have to see the picture. If I hear Top Gun playing 2 rooms away, I know exactly what's happening in that moment. I can see the visual in my head because it's just such an expertly crafted soundscape, which not a lot of movies can say that. I think that there's a very short list. And Beverly Hills Cop, that just like with Halloween, it's very simple.
That's great. Yeah.
You know, and it's we would. There were sometimes we'd be sound checking, and again, it's like a grindcore band. We would sound check with that. We would sound check with the theme from Night Court, which is an American sitcom. You know, and it's just quirky. But we're sitting back there, and I'm just putting blast beats underneath that, and it's ridiculous. But
it's great. It's great, you know. And one thing I definitely want to talk about in our chat today is one of my heroes, and it's not. It follows up nicely in this list of movie scores. Labyrinth, David Bowie.
Yes.
Do you know the whole album, or did you have the album with all the?
My sister had it, and
great
I
music.
heard it a lot.
Yeah.
And it's great. I really think that David Bowie was, although he started out in the 70s and certainly had a career there. He kind of changed into what the David Bowie that he was for the rest of his life in the 80s, in terms of sonically, what he was doing musically. It was very different.
A lot of artists couldn't adjust, and you had artists like Madonna did that, Kylie Minogue that's a great example from. She started in the 80s.
Mhm.
She's still popular today because she went with the times. She changed. David Bowie is a great example of that. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, and he just kind of, I mean, you go from collaborating with Queen after all the Ziggy Stardust stuff in the
Yeah,
70s, and then in the 80s he went into the synth, started really leaning into the saxophone a bit more,
yeah,
which was also a huge component to music in the 80s. Like saxophone just kind of blew up.
yeah.
Um, and I was a big fan of like Boots Randolph, Yakety sax, and stuff like that. I played,
Mhm.
my first instrument actually was saxophone, alto
Whoa.
sax. I played for 4 years. Couldn't
Mhm.
play a note to save my life now, 30 plus years later, but um, it taught a lot about, again, where we're talking
Yeah,
where things slot in and so forth. But I think about, a lot of people make fun of the saxophone guy in like the
can be.
Lost Boys, for example.
Oh yeah, 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 yeah. Saxophone.
But
When you
what
say
some people,
saxophone, I
Mhm.
immediately think, and I was trying to grab it, but my arm isn't long enough. Bruce Springsteen
Yes,
with that
yes, 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 yes.
upbeat, energetic music and that sax in "We Were Born to Run," for instance, or
Mhm.
that's great. Yeah, or the saxophone solo in that Rolling Stones number, the
Oh,
jazz
which one is it?
saxophone player.
Um,
I'm waiting for that song, right? I'm waiting for a friend, or if you know in the
I'm
chat a Rolling Stone song where there is
yeah.
a sax solo in the end played by one of the best saxophone jazz players, and he was
Mhm.
teased a lot by his friends because he was doing a rock song when you come from the jazz. But that happened a lot, that reminds me to another
Mhm.
beautiful story. The song "Beat It" from Michael Jackson, and the guitar solo in there, and the guitar player isn't, it's not credited on the album, and that was Eddie Van Halen. But Eddie didn't want his
Sure
boys
was.
in the band to know that he was doing a song for a pop artist like Michael Jackson, because that wasn't very rock and roll in the time. So that's another great
Mhm.
story, about.
But then you have, I'm never gonna dance again.
Oh,
Guilty feet have got
yeah,
no
no
rhythm.
rhythm. George
Yeah.
Michael. I love.
Oh,
I even like him in Wham. I
yeah.
like what he did
Yeah.
in Wham. It was feel good music, nothing more than that. But it really made me happy, that music. And when he went solo with his first song, "A Different Corner," beautiful. And what he
Mhm.
did after that, beautiful what he did.
Okay. Waiting on a friend. You were right. You were
Waiting on a
right.
Friend.
Thank you.
Thank you, James.
Thank you, Jim. Appreciate that, Mr. Salzberg. Um, and he did, yeah, Beat It.
Yeah.
And
Wake
then
me up before you
later
go.
on, yeah, that's a good one. Wake
Yeah.
me up before you
Before you
go,
go,
go.
go. Not planning on
Yeah.
going solo. Yeah, he did went solo.
Yeah, Newcastle. Yes, I have heard the Wham Slayer mashup by McClintock. There's another one that I believe they did, which
Mhm.
was Stevie Wonder with Metallica from Sad But True, and it
Mm.
was amazing. Um, it was like, that is one of the best mashups remixes I've ever heard, because it was
Yeah,
just like, and it has a prominent saxophone and kind of a Motown. I'm a
yeah,
gigantic Motown fan, man.
yeah. Great.
Um, um, Cool and the Gang. Did you
Oh
hear
yeah,
them? Saw them in concert 3 times in the 80s. It was
amazing.
amazing. Yes.
I was
Emergency,
I was too young in the
urgent,
80s to
I
go to
need you.
concerts. Oh, I wish I could have.
Well,
I've seen 80s bands after that. I was talking with Michael French
mhm,
about Duran Duran. Uh,
mhm,
I've seen McCartney a couple of times. I've seen plenty of artists over my Human League, to talk about another
mhm.
80s band from the UK. Pretty cool too. But I wish I could have seen them live in the 80s, especially artists that are no longer among us now. That feels like a
Yeah.
missed opportunity for me as a musician. But
Yeah, it's,
yeah.
where we were living at the time. We lived
Mhm.
in an area of, the States, called, Newport News, Virginia, which is right on the coast,
Mhm.
and we were on a base, and they had, Anheuser-Busch has something called Busch Gardens, which is an amusement park here in the States, and their main one is there. We'd go there, like, a couple times a summer every year, and at some point, they put in, like, just a modest amphitheater, and they would bring in all kinds of, like, popular bands. David
Yeah.
Copperfield was there.
Really?
David
Copperfield.
Yeah, Copperfield actually brought me on stage to do a trick once.
Really?
Yeah,
Amazing.
yeah. He made me disappear. It was weird. But we saw Kool and the Gang there multiple times, and then
great.
Johnny Cash twice. I've
Oh.
seen Johnny Cash in like 1985.
Legend. Wish I would have seen him. He's one of my heroes, definitely too. Yeah, I have a lot of heroes, you know, like Heroes, a great song from Bowie too. But yeah, a lot of those heroes like Cash that aren't around anymore. Such a shame. And we lose more every year. As a musician, I don't know how that is for you, that you notice even more the musicians that, you know, that you yeah.
Yeah, and because I am, you know, my moniker is related to the heavier stuff, people assume that all I listen to is this stuff. And granted, I'm not helping my image by wearing all this stuff all the time. Well, part of it is, and you guys in chat, you're probably gonna laugh at me, but it's 100% true. Try to find a Tears for Fears or a Duran Duran T-shirt in American XXX. You can't do it. They don't make them. I would wear every artist we've mentioned that I've been like, oh, I would absolutely, like when Eddie Van Halen died, I tried to get a Van Halen shirt. Took me like 3 hours to find one, and it was a bootleg just to get it in my size. You know, granted, everyone's like, well, put down the beer and maybe you could wear. I know that, okay, but I'd like to have the larger shirt. But I would wear Duran Duran, Kool and the Gang, Johnny. I have a Johnny Cash shirt. Tears for Fears, the whole, like, the list goes on. Like, I would love to like support all of those acts that meant something to me when I was younger.
Keep them alive. The memory that way. Yeah.
Yes. The 80s pop stuff really, really made a big impression on me. And it's something that, again, in the circles that I have run in musically, that doesn't tend to get discussed too much. But one of the guitar players that I had, he was like me. He liked all kinds of stuff. He would be like into some of the classic rock, like Three Dog Night and stuff like that. But also when, you know, Never Gonna Dance Again would come on the radio, we were singing it together. And the other guitar player, the bass player in the back, like, oh God, shut up. You know, because they're just like, we're metal all the time. And it's insane. I can't believe that this person hasn't been brought up yet today, but Prince,
definitely. Yeah. Such a
Scott, he says,
great guy.
Great. Go to see Prince. He's out of town last tour. Yeah. I think my sister saw him once.
Been in the Netherlands a lot, Prince, and he has a really small group of friends that he likes to perform through and keep it intimate. So he's great artist. Yeah, Prince.
James Salzberg is asking your first instrument because he missed it earlier in the chat.
Yeah, for me, the bass guitar. I started on a bass guitar and went from that to guitar, and then adding all sort of effects to my guitar to make it sound like this. To make it sound like a synthesizer. There is a thing like too much. You're right about that, Jim. I always hope that I didn't went too far out with that.
Every tone you've played for me before and after, like this has been great. I think you've got a good handle on what makes a good sound and everything else. For those bass players out there watching, the secret to a good bass tone, even if you're using an outboard amplifier, is a SansAmp. Use a SansAmp in your effects loop. You will get the gnarliest, grittiest tone ever. If you want that, you need to get nice hot signal out of it. Especially if you have passive pickups, because if you have passive pickups, it's hard to get more of that. That kind of undeniable, like physically, like the actual sound of metal clanging on the thing. Whereas your active pickups will kind of give you that nice boom, 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 kind of thing going. Or like for like a lot of the slap and pop bass players too. If you're forced to play with a passive pickup and you're doing something that needs a lot of lively tone, get you a SansAmp.
Definitely. We're going to do another little quiz here for everybody in the chat. One more short bit I'm going to play, and you can guess what it is. And this is really an easy one. we have no prize to give. I would say a hint from the presenter, but let's see if it's tuned. All right. Let's see if somebody recognized the intro to this. That should give it away if you didn't recognize it on the beginning. I should have cut my fingernails. It's really hard to play guitar when you.
It is.
That's a
it
thing.
Really is because it catches, right? It just kind of catches on the thing. And also pressing it, depending upon what your technique is, how you press in the fret, sometimes it'll miss and stuff like that.
Yeah, definitely.
It's maddening. So while we are waiting, Keith Knight guesses Ghost Riders in the Sky.
A great song, but it's not. I love that song. I also like a bit of Western thing. There's one video on my channel where I show some 80s footage when we were visiting a theme park in Belgium, which is just across the border in the Netherlands. And that theme park is based on the American Wild West. And there's a song I sing there from called El Dorado, from the movie El Dorado. If you like to hear me sing a Western song in the old days of Hollywood style, go to that video and just watch the first minute. You hear me that song and let me know what you think of it, because that's a style I'm not used to singing.
Ennio Morricone is the old and tired. Chris is the new hotness. Just saying. But while we're waiting on another guest from chat, I'm going to ask you my last question. Because we are at the 90-minute mark, and I know we want to start wrapping up. Although the 80s will never come again, it will never get that back. What do you feel is the best way to preserve that? There's certainly a lot of bands that are kind of aping the sound, like we talked about before, and they're great. Like Synthwave is a great example of that stuff, but that's one component of an overall thing. And certainly there's been a revival in all genres of bringing some old school stuff back. And while those are good, and I enjoy those things, it's not the same. So because we have this snapshot of a decade musically, what do you think is the best way to preserve that feeling, or to spread that to people that maybe don't have that full breadth of experience?
I think a great way is through certain series on TV that keep that music, that vibe, that feeling alive. And I think one of the best known examples is on Netflix, Stranger Things, that take you back to the 80s with that music. That's one way. Another way is for musicians and artists like you and me, who also like to do cover songs from time to time. Play those songs, keep on playing them. Long as somebody is there to play a song, it can be remembered. If nobody plays a song anymore, it gets forgotten, and that's the worst thing I think that can happen. So keep playing them songs, keeping them alive, and through series, I think that's definitely two things that might help preserve that a bit. And there's a bit of a revival going with 80s. We've seen that over the last years right now, because our age group is in that, in that age now that we watch that stuff with our kids and have enough money to recollect our toys and all of that. So this is the perfect moment for that revival from the 80s. And I think it always will be around till there's nobody left from our generation to remember it. And then there's a small, band of fans, I think, that will still preserve it. But yeah.
That's probably the best possible answer. I will say this. I am unlikely to forget this conversation anytime soon. I've had an absolute blast hanging out with you, and I've learned a lot, and you've reminded me of things that I don't get to talk about nearly enough, so I thank you for that experience so much. So, as if people in chat didn't already know, where can they find you on the internet?
Where can they find me? They can find me on YouTube on the channel Chasing 80s Toys, and it's somewhere below in the description. And the best way otherwise to find me, I would say Instagram. Search for Chris Miwa Chasing 80s Toys or Chasing 80s Toys. I'm sure you find me. And I try to be present in as much live streams from my friends from the community as I can. So you will see me on Joburg. You will see me on Grindhead Gym whenever I can, or at least when I'm not asleep, Jim. You can see me on Retro Blasting, Analog, Shabby Geek, all those channels. I try to watch as much, but there's so much out there, so it's impossible to be there. But I love all those channels. We have a great community, and yeah, that's where you can find me. In the meantime, I'm looking in the chat to see if there's any more guesses coming in. I Need a Hero. That's not my guess, but great song, Bob Squad. Bob Squad is in the house. Another great YouTube channel, my good buddy Bob Hansen from the US. Thank you for watching, Bob.
Bob is really great.
Appreciate it, buddy.
Appreciate it. So do you want to reveal the answer before we go, or do you want to leave it something for the comments?
Yeah, I can give the answer. You can give. You recognized it in it. Did you recognize my intro where I messed up a bit because I forgot to cut my fingernails, or did you remember recognizing when I start doing?
Yeah, when it kicked in. But I will let you do the reveal. This was your game, so you do the reveal.
That was Cure with Forest.
Yep.
Great, not a great band from the time, definitely.
And certainly the template for so much that came in the decade after. I think that's one thing, and maybe we should have another discussion another time about the 90s, because that's a whole other conversation.
That's a whole other conversation. Would love to.
Yeah, because I think everything we've talked about set the template, set the pattern of here's the watermark. Now let's see where we can go. Everything got bigger. Movies got more bombastic. Film was definitely, with that, music got faster, it got heavier, it got softer, it got more beautiful, more intricate. Everything was just extreme. So the next time that you see Chris on this channel, I think we're going to talk about the 90s as a whole. We might bring some other people on, because to finish out the trifecta of Chasing 80s Toys crew, next week we're going to have Jeff Barker on, and we're going to talk to him about all kinds of fun stuff, and I have some surprises in store for everyone when we do that. So we will see you on that stream next week, same bat time, same bat channel. Chris, thank you so much for being here. Thank you all for being here, and we will see you on the next one. Cheers, guys.